everybody. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Now, what I mean by this is if you think about it, that's a good description of the world today, right? Meaning if you are genuinely excited about innovation and about change and about uncertainty, that you see it as something to be embraced, not to be afraid of, well, this is the best of times. And we could argue it's the best of times in human history to be alive and doing the sort of things we do. And if you don't like change, if you don't like innovation, well, it's the worst of times. And as far as we can tell, things are only going to get worse for you. Right? Now, the reason for this, look at that. Do you notice that? By the way, note the skills. Just keep going and wait for Harry to set up the PowerPoint for you. Act like nothing is wrong and then jump back in. Hit play. Just as planned. So the reason for this is, if you work for a publicly traded company and you're wondering why your CEO is so concerned about this, right? You can see this one slide right behind me here. It's because of this, right? This is measuring the time it took for people, 1 million people, to start using a technology. So there's, Netflix. Look at this. You've probably seen this before. How long do you think it took for 1 million people to start using ChatGPT? You've seen the statistics, right? 5 days. Now this is astronomical. So everybody suddenly woke up and thought, really, we ought to be paying attention to this. And now you get to theme number 3. Everywhere you turn, somebody is talking about this. There's a lot of noise. And on the one hand, the noise says, this is exciting, it's one of the most significant shifts in computing in human history. The other noise says, I'm terrified by this, and you ought to be too, right? And along with this comes a lot of concerns about what is it going to mean for me and my jobs. So it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. The reason for it is because of the rate of change, and the problem is people don't know how to make sense of it. So, well, now what, right? Well, now what is the thing that we are obsessed with at BTS and our partners here at 1819, and specifically at the innovation practice. And the way we explore this obsession at BTS is we put executives through highly customized simulations of the future. We've been doing this for about 35 years, including for our friends at Microsoft. I have a little bit of a man crush on Satya Nadella. I have to say it's true, because he brought BTS in to help with the transition from the Ballmer days to the new days. And what I'd like to share with you now in the 15 minutes that remain are 3 things we've learned. 3 things we've learned about this transition in 3 chapters that I think are probably good for all of us, whether we're large businesses or small businesses. So here we go, 3 things we've learned so far. And chapter 1 is entitled, what is it? What is AI? I want to build off that really great slide that Medea showed you, remember at the very beginning, where she talked about the evolution of AI. And the reason I want to start with where she left off is because there's a lot of noise about AI. It can be very confusing. This is what the curriculum of an AI course looks like at one prestigious university. Don't ask me who, it's not Cincinnati, by the way. But I show it to you because it's baffling. And the fact of the matter is, if I just blow on this, there's a lot of stuff in that circle, but as business people and human beings interested in AI, the fact is I can break this into some subsegments, and there's only one bit that matters. That's the bit that matters for all of us. So let me just throw that back up and walk you back through the 3 things to know. So the first thing is artificial intelligence is what? I mean, every day we come in contact with it, but have you ever thought about what it actually is? Well, here's what it is. Artificial intelligence is the simulation of a cognitive task using computers. That's what it is. And to think about this, right, it's simulating the things we do with our brains. Simulating being the operative word. A good analog is if you think about the Industrial Revolution, right, that's where we simulated the use of physical tasks, humans and beasts, using machines. Well, artificial intelligence is the simulating of thinking tasks using math. Supercomputers and math. That's what artificial intelligence is. When you open your phone and it reads your face, math. When your car drives down the road, more math. And if you didn't like math in high school like me, it might say, terrifying, thanks to folks like Microsoft. They've made it easy. But this is the thing to know. So that's artificial intelligence. It's a simulation of any cognitive task that we just do a flick. There it is. That's the operative thing. Simulation of any cognitive task using math. Now, there's a lot in there. If I slice the onion just a little bit closer, the next thing we find, a subset of this, anybody remember what Medea said? It's machine learning. That's a subset of artificial intelligence. And this is where we train machines to discover things in data all on their own. It's weird, right? It's what we're doing. And here's how you can think about it. Right? These are all the robots at Azure Cognitive Service working away. Look at me, just another 1.1 million books to read. Yeah, that's what they're doing. And when they're done, they're ready to go to work for you. So there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff in machine learning. If I slice the onion a little bit more, what do we get? Well, Medea told us already, deep learning. And remember what she said about this? This is artificial neural networks loosely based on how the brain works. When you see a picture of this online, it's going to look like this. And you might think, what just happened? Your what just happened is actually justified. It's still math. But the amazing thing about deep learning is it made these machines so much more accurate than anybody ever thought was possible. And that's where the magic is. To them, this is where you find transformers, not the robots that turn the cars. It's the things like ChatGPT and large language models. This is where they sit. And as people interested in AI, this is really all you need to know. This is really all you need to know. Now you get the language. That brings us to chapter 2. And by the way, this is Johnny Depp trying to pretend to be me. I don't know why he does this. I'll be Johnny, I'm like, I'm just me, but I'll take it. This is where generative AI comes in as well, right? That Medea and talked about before. And I'll talk to Johnny about that consultant hero worship later, but there it is. So that's thing number 1. How about thing number 2? How is it doing this? And why should we care? You should. You don't have to learn how to do a Python implementation in TensorFlow for fellow nerds to understand AI. And if you didn't understand what I just said, you don't need to, actually. But you should understand the basics of what's happening with AI. And here are the basics. AI does something called X to Y mapping. Input to output mapping. A little algorithm in the middle. Now, what are you talking about? What kind of input? Well, the input is data. And the output is a kind of prediction. Prove it to me, Peter. There are 3 use cases. Let's go with a familiar one. Netflix. What are they doing? The input is your behavior. What is the algorithm predicting? Yell it out.
Which is next?
Yes, exactly. What do you want to watch next? Okay, that was easy. Now let's go to another Microsoft customer. I told you I have a little crush on them. Norway Royal Salmon. This is a salmon fishery. Thanks to Microsoft, they put cameras underwater, powered by Azure. Data, what do you think it is? It's pictures of fish. What is the algorithm predicting, do you think? Yes, who said that? You got it. The biomass of the fish, is it healthy? So now I don't have to send a human being down there anymore. I can just have the AI tell me the fish are ready to harvest. And then finally, ChatGPT, putting in text. What's the algorithm predicting? You got it, more text. Put in a question, it's predicting an answer. Right, so as we were watching Melissa do her demonstration, that's what was happening. So now, who cares about all this? If you remember just one thing about ChatGPT in particular, and the screen was black behind me, I would have you remember this. It's as a consultant, I'm always trying to sensationalize stuff. That's what consultants do. You notice this consultants are saying everything was the most important thing ever, and then, by the way, now you can buy our services. And it's easy to get caught up in the perpetual vanity of the moment, I think, as a consultant, but this is as understated a remark about AI as I can possibly make. What makes ChatGPT so interesting is that it turns
every human being in the planet into a coder. It turns every human being on the planet into a coder. It doesn't matter your education. If you have a laptop and you can speak your language, you can now be a coder. Now, some practical, what does this look like in the business world? Well, you see things like this. If you've been using Duolingo lately, you'll notice that Duolingo now can have very nuanced conversations. You can talk in Espanol or in Nihongo, whatever, about what it felt like to climb 14,000 feet in a round of air. Or you can talk about really nuanced emotional content. You couldn't do that before. If you're at Morgan Stanley, they've managed to program a large language model with the combined intelligence of every wealth manager that ever worked there. So instead of trying to get a coaching conversation with that partner who only has 20 minutes to give you, you can talk with all of the partners and their proprietary model. On the other hand, if you are part of Be My Eyes, which is a startup in Northern Europe, ChatGPT can now converse with you even though you're sight impaired and tell you what you're looking at, how much food you have in your refrigerator or don't. Data in, data out. And that's just the beginning. And if you're wondering what's coming next, well, imagine what the world will look like when every human being, hungry, scrappy, ambitious, loving life, wanting to make a change in the world, starts innovating with this stuff. Because they're already doing it. They're already doing it. And it's not 100,000 people that went to Caltech. It's 7 billion people who have laptops, many of whom will be lucky enough to get Azure. Which brings us to the third and final thought, which is simply this. Now what? What I would have you think about in your day-to-day work as you're trying to figure out how to use this technology is this question. Who's training who? How many people have read this book? Okay, a couple of you, right? Remember this? There was a lot of good stuff in this book, but there was one key idea that Jared landed. Remember this? For those of you who read that, if you haven't read it, this was his key book, his key statement. What are you talking about? Well, what he's talking about is that in human history, it was the cultivation of wheat and all of the technology that arose. Now, and if you doubt that technology isn't training us, just have a look at what you're doing with your smartphone. It's just technology, but it has totally changed you and your life and how you communicate and how you do things in profound ways. So the final thought I want to leave with everyone is this. And this. 3 questions for you. 1, 2, 3. Because the answers to these questions are not going to come from consultants, they're going to come from you. From your organization, from your vision, your purpose, what you're trying to accomplish in the world, where you want to go next. So before I invite our panel conversation, what's up? That alarm, I think, means it's time for a panel conversation. If you remember just 3 things about this quick 15-minute romp, I'd have you remember this. And this. Yep, superpowers. And this.